Hello. Today we're going to talk about some different types of numbers. This is in section 5.2, which talks about complex numbers. And before we can get into complex numbers, we have to go back to some old words which you may or may not have heard before. Certainly some of them, yes. But the first one are the natural numbers, and I put the abbreviation of capital N in there because in Algebra 1 I've seen them abbreviate these numbers, and I don't want to mess you up if it happens that they have the abbreviation in them. But the natural numbers are also known as the counting numbers. And are written as 1, 2, 3, and so on. The whole numbers have one additional member from the natural numbers. The whole numbers start with 0. Integers, abbreviated as Z, because I is used for something else. But the integers are positive numbers, negative numbers, and 0. And it is denoted as -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, going on in either direction. And the nice thing about natural numbers, whole numbers, and integers is that there's no fractions in any of those. But where the fractions come in is our next set of numbers, which are the rational numbers. And the definition of this one is that any number that can be written as a fraction. So keep in mind, just as a couple of examples here, I didn't leave enough space, but as a couple of examples, I mean, 1/3 is something that can be written as a fraction, but the number 3 can also be written as a fraction. We would just write it as 3/1. 0.25 is a rational number. It can be written as a fraction. 0 can be written as a fraction. We don't write it as 0/1, but we can write it as a fraction. So just keep in mind for those. I messed up my space then for my next one, which is irrational numbers. So if a rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction, then irrational numbers are any number that cannot be written as a fraction. I think the technical definition is it's a non-repeating, non-terminating number. I usually say it's a non-repeating infinite decimal. But the most popular irrational number, of course, is pi. But something like the square root of 5 is a non-repeating, non-terminating number. So square roots of numbers where we can't simplify the square root is an irrational number. Again, I remember the abbreviation for irrational as capital I. I did look it up on the internet this morning, and the internet says P, which is new to me, but I'm old, so maybe they've changed it over the years. Real numbers, the abbreviation for real, it's a capital R, but it's got 2 bars. So it's 2 bars, and then you make the R, the capital R symbol. And the technical definition is that it's all rational and irrational numbers. So anything above this. Real numbers are natural numbers, they're whole numbers, they're integers, they're rationals, they're irrationals. And that's early on in the slides. It's one of the first slides. They only talk about on the first one irrational, rational, real, and integers, but I put them all in. But on slide number 7, they talk about imaginary numbers, and I'll do some examples here in another video in a couple minutes. But an imaginary numbers happen when we take the square root of a negative number. And again, as I get into the examples here in another video, what happens is that the square root of -1 is an imaginary number, and it's abbreviated with lowercase I. And then finally, that leads us to the complex, which is on slide 18. And the complex number has a real number part and an imaginary part. So it's written as A plus BI. It could be A minus BI. It doesn't make any difference. But it has a real number part and an imaginary part. And I need to pull that up so you can see that. So I want to turn my paper over for a moment just to show you a flow chart of the whole number system. I don't know if it'll help or not. They kind of do that in the program here. But really, the overall number is that it's the complex numbers is where we start. And again, the complex numbers, they break it up into a real number part and an imaginary part. Well, if you think about the technical definition of real, it's all rational, so any number that can be written as a fraction, and irrational numbers. And then rational is made up of the naturals, the whole, and the integers. So there's just a little kind of summary of how the numbers, the different types of number systems work.